Death penalties have existed as far back as we can tell. History books and records show death penalties as far back as ancient Greece. They have invented many devious techniques that have been used to carry out this sentence, one of the most gruesome being the brazen bull. If you've never heard of the brazen bull, then be thankful you weren't born in ancient Greece. This mode of execution was developed by Perillus of Athens, and it involved putting the condemned in a bull structure made of pure bronze, and a fire is set underneath, melting the skin and bones in a slow, gruesome way. But while this horrific execution technique is ancient history, 55 countries around the world still carry out the death penalty today, and they've come up with crafty ways to send the condemned to the Grim Reaper. China. The chief executioner. First on our list is China, the second most populated country on the planet. It is reported that China has single-handedly executed more people than the whole world combined. Is it a sad attempt to reduce its population? Well, we can't say. According to the Daily Mail, the Chinese government uses mobile death vans, firing squads, and lethal injections to carry out more state-sanctioned executions. The number of executions carried out yearly by the Chinese government is considered a state secret. However, there are speculations that the number runs into thousands of people per year. According to a report published in 2021, the 1997 Penal Code of China, which is still the present criminal code today, states 46 crimes punishable by death, including 24 violent crimes and 22 non-violent crimes. Now, you might think they rely on traditional methods, but China has come up with something even more unsettling: mobile execution vans. These death vans drive around cities, injecting prisoners with lethal doses on the spot. And if that wasn't disturbing enough, here's something even more shocking. Not all crimes punishable by death involve violence. In China, even white-collar crimes can get you executed. Don't believe me? Well, let's talk about Zheng Xiaoyu, the former head of China's Food and Drug Administration, who is said to have allowed tainted products into mainland China. Zheng, during his tenure, took bribes totaling more than 6.49 million RMB, or a rough equivalent of 850,000 USD, from 8 pharmaceutical companies. He was sentenced by a trial court in Beijing for taking bribes and dereliction of duty. He approved unproven and unsafe medicines while working as the head of China's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, sending over 800 people in Panama to their early grave. Zheng entered an allocutus, pleading for a lighter sentence, appealing that he had confessed his crimes and cooperated with investigators. However, the court ruled that while these were valid mitigating factors, his crimes were far too severe to warrant leniency, and he was tagged a great danger to the country and its reputation. The appeal was rejected on June 22nd, and he was executed by lethal injection on July 10, 2007. In his final note, Zheng expressed remorse for his actions and apologized. Japan. Japan is not only known for making some of the most iconic anime, but they're also part of the 55 countries that still implement the death penalty. Everybody loves a surprise, except if you're on Japan's death row. Why? Because in Japan, inmates never know when their execution is coming. Execution of the death sentence can be after a decade, a week, or even the next day. Inmates on death row are usually informed 2 hours before their execution. It could be tomorrow, next year, or even a decade from now. And when the time finally arrives, they're informed just 2 hours before they are taken to the gallows. Imagine waking up every day not knowing if it's your last. Well, that's exactly what happened to Tomohiro Kato, the perpetrator behind the Akihabara massacre in 2008. Kato stabbed at least 12 people using a dagger, killing 4 other people and injuring 8. He waited 7 years before receiving that calm knock on his cell door on the 26th of July, 2022. But the real question is, why does Japan keep this practice so secretive? The answer will leave you speechless. The Japanese government defends this practice, claiming it's a good way to prevent suicide. But civil rights activists around the world see it differently, stomping their feet that it is wicked and inhumane. USA, the lethal injection nightmare. The USA, arguably one of the most powerful nations on Earth, still practices capital punishment. Although 23 of the states have abolished it, 27 still enforce it. It might not be the brazen bull, but it's not as humane as some might think. The USA uses 3 major techniques: gas chambers, electrocutions, and the most common is the lethal injection. On the face of it, it seems like a quick way to send a death row inmates to the great beyond, but some of those inmates suffered immeasurable pain on their journey. Take lethal injection as a case study. Prisoners have suffered for over an hour, convulsing in agony as botched injections slowly shut down their bodies. And the most disturbing case? Clayton Lockett. Lockett was strapped to the execution table, expecting a quick death. Instead, he clenched his teeth, convulsed, and even tried to rise from the gurney as the drugs failed to work properly. What followed was a long 43 minutes of agony. Lockett convulsed, clenched his teeth, and even tried to rise from the gurney. Officials were forced to halt the execution, but it was too late. He eventually died of a heart attack, making this one of the most disturbing lethal injection failures in America's history. But if you think that's bad, just wait until you hear what's happening in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, the land of public beheadings. If you think lethal injections or electrocutions are inhumane, then you're in for a shocker. Saudi Arabia remains the only country in the world that uses public beheading as a means of carrying out capital punishment, severing the heads of inmates on death row. Yes, you heard right. You could be literally taking a stroll to cool your head only to see the head of an inmate rolling by. An alarming fact is that while the world is leaning towards the reduction and abolishment of capital punishment, Saudi Arabia is doing the opposite. And it's not just murderers who face the sword. In 2024 alone, nearly 200 people were executed, many for non-violent crimes, including protests against the government. One particularly disturbing case was that of Abdul Majid Al-Nimr, a retired traffic police officer accused of terrorism-related offenses related to joining Al-Qaeda. But his court records told a very different story, one that suggests he was executed not for terrorism, but for simply speaking out. The process leading up to his execution was flooded with irregularities and a lack of transparency. Agnes Calamard of Amnesty International said Saudi Arabia is the only country that still uses this method. Capital punishment is used both for offenders of lethal crimes and non-lethal crimes. But Saudi Arabia isn't alone in its harsh methods. In North Korea, the government has found even more terrifying ways to condemn people to death. North Korea. Executions beyond your worst fears. Another pro-capital punishment country is North Korea. North Korea is one of the few countries that secludes themselves from the world, and not all their reasons could be for good. Although the number of death rows is kept hidden, speculative numbers from defectors are alarming, and though unverifiable, the number tallies to over 1,000 executions since 2009. Some reports claim that North Korea has used anti-aircraft guns to execute prisoners. Yes, you heard that right. These guns are designed to tear through armored vehicles, yet they've allegedly been used on human bodies, reducing them to nothing but unrecognizable remains. And if you think that's just a rumor, consider this. Kim Jong-un allegedly had his own uncle by marriage executed by firing squad in 2013. But why? And was this really the most brutal execution in North Korea's history? The truth is even more disturbing. He simply spoke against the supreme leader. We're aware there's usually family feud by in-laws, but it seems Kim Jong-un, North Korea's supreme leader, took it up a notch. Conclusion. The death penalty has always been a controversial subject, with over 70% of the world siding against this capital punishment, while the few cling to brutal and archaic methods. So, the real question is, should all death row executions be abolished, or do some crimes truly deserve capital punishment? And if yes, what should be the best way? We'd like to hear your take on this in the comment section below. And if you think this was shocking, wait until you hear about the rarest execution method ever used. But that's a story for another time. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel.